The command post was a canvas tent set behind a hedgerow near Le Mesnil-Herman, 10 miles south of Saint-Lô. The air was heavy with cordite and damp soil. A single map table, 4 field telephones, and 1 man at the centre, Lieutenant General Omar Nelson Bradley, commanding the US First Army. Outside, the thunder of Operation Cobra's opening bombardment rolled across the horizon. 1,500 heavy bombers, mostly B-17s and B-24s, were dropping 4,000 tons of explosives in a corridor 6 miles wide. It was the largest concentrated airstrike ever used in support of ground forces. Bradley listened to the artillery liaison's voice over the static. Target zones Charlie through Easy confirmed. Ground movement in 5 minutes. He was 51 years old, wearing plain field gear, no decorations visible. He wasn't a theatrical general. His posture was deliberate, quiet, analytical, still. Around him, aides tracked the timing of 35,000 vehicles scheduled to move through the breach toward Ardennes. He looked up only once and said, "If this works, the breakout begins today. If it fails, we're stuck on this coast until winter." Bradley's command was the largest ever held by an American in the field, 12th Army Group, 1.3 million soldiers, 90 divisions, 7 corps. His area of responsibility stretched from Normandy to the Ardennes, a front of 600 miles. By comparison, Ulysses Grant in 1865 commanded 700,000. Dwight Eisenhower oversaw the entire Allied expedition, but it was Bradley who gave daily orders to the troops moving through the Bocage country. At 09:38, a runner entered with a radio intercept. Friendly bombing error. Coordinates shifted 1,000 yards short. Seconds later, the ground shook. A line of explosions crept toward the forward assembly area. In less than 10 minutes, 77 Americans were dead, among them Lieutenant General Leslie McNair. Bradley closed his eyes for 1 second, then said quietly, "Keep the advance on schedule. No one stops." The breakout began at 11. Columns of Sherman tanks from 7th Corps punched through the German 352nd Infantry's lines. 20th Armoured Division recorded an advance of 3.2 miles by nightfall, the fastest American movement since D-Day. Bradley's staff logged the figure, his only comment, "That's the beginning." His leadership wasn't impulsive. He issued standing orders by numbers, not emotions. Directive 17. If you must choose between speed and order, choose order. It lasts longer. He preferred complete coordination over battlefield spectacle. Patton, still waiting in England for his command to deploy, called him slow. Eisenhower called him steady. The soldiers called him Brad. By June 30th, the First Army had liberated 500 square miles of France. German resistance collapsed along the Saint-Lô-Perrier road. The logistics reports tell the story in arithmetic. 145,000 tons of supplies landed, 25,000 vehicles unloaded, casualty rate 2.1%, lower than predicted. Bradley's headquarters maintained 94% communication reliability between corps, a record figure in any modern war to that point. That night, as rain fell on the tents, a staff officer brought him coffee and the preliminary casualty list. He read it, signed it, and said, "They'll call this a victory tomorrow, but tomorrow we'll have to feed it." Then he placed the paper on his field desk, turned down the lamp, and stepped outside. In the distance, Normandy burned in controlled chaos, columns of smoke from German fuel dumps marking the route south. To most men, the battle looked like noise and fury. To Bradley, it looked like coordination, imperfect, human, but working. He was not there to inspire, he was there to make sure the math of war kept moving forward. By dawn, the front had advanced 5 miles. Bradley hadn't raised his voice once. August 29th, 1893. Clark, Missouri, a town of 350 people surrounded by wheat and silence. Omar Nelson Bradley was born in a house without electricity or plumbing. His father, John Bradley, was a school teacher who died of pneumonia when Omar was 14. His mother, Sarah, kept teaching so her son could attend high school. There were no soldiers in the family, no lineage of war. only order, punctuality, and duty. 3 traits that would later define him more than any medal. In 1911, Bradley entered the United States Military Academy at West Point. His classmates would later call it the class the stars fell on. Of 164 graduates in 1915, 59 would become generals. Among them, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Hubert Harmon, James Van Fleet, and Courtney Hodges. Bradley ranked 44th, solid, average, unremarkable. His instructors noted him as quiet, precise, dependable. He excelled in mathematics and marksmanship. When the First World War broke out, he was sent to Montana, not Europe. While Pershing's expeditionary forces fought in France, Bradley guarded copper mines in Butte. "I didn't hear a shot fired in anger," he later wrote, "but I learned the value of men who did their jobs without applause." That sentence became his personal creed. Through the 1920s and 1930s, Bradley's progress was slow but steady. He spent 6 years as an instructor at the infantry school in Fort Benning, Georgia. There, he worked under General George C. Marshall, the future Army Chief of Staff. Marshall noticed the young officer's calm efficiency. "He never makes noise when he moves," Marshall once remarked, "but things move when he does." Bradley developed a reputation for detail. He could quote supply ratios, fuel burn rates, and troop readiness by memory. His notebooks contained precise entries: daily rations per man, 3.5 pounds, transport capacity per ton-mile, casualty replacement forecasts per regiment. Unlike Patton, who read Napoleon, Bradley read logistics manuals. His world was arithmetic, not rhetoric. By 1939, with Europe again sliding toward war, Bradley was commanding the infantry school. He redesigned officer training courses, shorter lectures, more field exercises, and statistical performance reviews. His system increased graduation rates by 18%, while reducing accidents by 22%. When the Army expanded from 200,000 men in 1939 to 1.6 million in 1941, many of its new officers had passed through Bradley's program. When Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 1941, Bradley was still wearing the silver eagle of a colonel. He was 50 years old, quiet, precise, and virtually unknown outside the Army. But his name was already circulating in the War Department. Eisenhower, now a staff officer in Washington, wrote in his notes, "Bradley, calm, reliable, knows how to handle men without drama." He was promoted to Brigadier General in February 1942. His first assignment, to oversee the training of the newly formed 82nd Infantry Division at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. Among his trainees was a young major named James M. Gavin, later commander of the 82nd Airborne. Gavin would later write, "Bradley wasn't trying to build heroes. He was trying to build survivors." His leadership had no slogans, no theatrics. Orders were short. Meetings ended on time. He believed that soldiers didn't need speeches, they needed clarity. When an aide once asked how he wanted his officers to behave, Bradley answered, "Like professionals, not performers." In April 1943, he boarded a transport ship for North Africa. His luggage contained only field manuals and a single pair of binoculars. The war he had spent decades studying in theory was now waiting for him in Tunisia. And there, for the first time, the quiet instructor would have to prove that precision could survive chaos. March 5, 1943. Tebessa, Tunisia. The desert wind carried dust and failure. American II Corps had just been driven back at Kasserine Pass. 6,500 casualties, 183 tanks destroyed, 104 guns lost. German panzers had torn through uncoordinated American lines, and the Army's first major campaign in Europe had ended in humiliation. When General Dwight D. Eisenhower arrived at II Corps headquarters, he found confusion and silence. Field radios were out. Units had withdrawn without orders. Commanders blamed each other. And then, in the corner of the tent, he saw a man standing quietly, hands behind his back, listening. Omar N. Bradley. Eisenhower spoke plainly. "You're taking over 2 Corps. Fix it." Bradley replaced Major General Lloyd Friedendorf that evening. He didn't shout or threaten. He toured the front on foot, visited every division, and took notes. Over 3 days, he rebuilt the Corps from the ground up. Communications, logistics, command lines. He removed 10 senior officers for incompetence, reassigned 5, and promoted 4 battalion commanders based on field merit, not seniority. His method was arithmetic. Find the error, correct it, move on. The first staff briefing under Bradley began at 0700 and ended at 0740. His first order: we will stop retreating, we will learn the ground, and we will move only when we understand what's in front of us. Within 2 weeks, he had reorganized supply convoys to deliver ammunition and food by night instead of day. Fuel losses from ambushes dropped by 47%. He replaced paper maps with aerial reconnaissance prints, reduced message relays from 5 steps to 2, and doubled field telephone coverage. For the first time, 2 Corps began functioning as a single system. The next test came on March 23, 1943, the Battle of El Guitar. Bradley's subordinate, Major General George S. Patton, led the counterattack. Together they coordinated artillery concentrations by radio code: maple, iron, lemon. When 10th Panzer Division advanced with 50 tanks, American anti-tank gunners fired from pre-measured ranges. By nightfall, 30 German tanks burned on the valley floor. The US lines held. Bradley's report to Eisenhower was 4 sentences long. 2 Corps held firm, enemy armour neutralised, infantry morale restored, ready for next phase. That report marked a turning point. Eisenhower wrote in his diary, "Bradley has balance. He restores discipline without fear. The troops trust him." In July, during Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily, Bradley commanded the US 2 Corps once more, under Patton's flamboyant leadership. The 2 men could not have been more different. Patton stormed forward in an open jeep, pistols polished. Bradley stood behind his map table, calculating supply routes to the nearest ton. But the partnership worked. Between July 10th and August 17th, American forces advanced 125 miles across the island, capturing Palermo and reaching Messina ahead of the British 8th Army. In the final report to Eisenhower, Bradley recorded the numbers. 180,000 Allied troops landed, 3,200 ships deployed, 2,590 aircraft used, 23,000 Axis prisoners taken. His casualty ratio? 1 US soldier lost for every 9 Axis troops neutralized. When the campaign ended, Eisenhower promoted Bradley to Lieutenant General and placed him in command of the 1st US Army, the force that would lead the D-Day invasion. That night, in a tent outside Gela, Patton toasted him with whiskey. "You're the calmest son of a bitch I've ever seen," he said. Bradley replied, "Someone has to be." Behind that quiet sentence lay a truth that would define his command in Normandy. Chaos could win battles, but only discipline could win a war. June 6, 1944, 06:32 hours. The first American troops of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions were landing on Omaha Beach. Waves of men stumbled through the surf into a storm of machine gun fire. By 07:15, half of the leading wave was down, 1,200 casualties in 40 minutes. Radio lines failed. LCVPs burned in the tide. From the headquarters ship Augusta, General Omar Bradley watched through binoculars, expression fixed, voice low. "We're losing the first wave," an officer said. Bradley didn't answer. He adjusted the rangefinder. "The tide's turning," he finally replied, "and so will they." By 0900, a single radio report reached him from the beach. "Some progress at exit D3. That line became the thread of hope he needed. Bradley ordered reinforcements to that narrow corridor, retasking naval fire to suppress the cliffs above. By 11 o'clock, US troops had breached the German line, 3,000 yards inland. Omaha was held. 2 weeks later, June 25th, Operation Cobra began. It was Bradley's operation from conception to execution. a precision strike designed to break the stalemate of the Bocage country. 1,500 heavy bombers dropped 4,000 tons of explosives on German positions near Saint-Lô. He planned the assault corridor to be exactly 2,500 meters wide, calculated based on tank maneuver limits and infantry follow-up speed. But the plan nearly collapsed before it began. A miscommunication in bomb run coordinates led to disaster. Short drops landed inside the American line. 77 soldiers killed, 463 wounded, including Lieutenant General Leslie J. McNair, the highest-ranking U.S. officer to die by friendly fire. Bradley's first words upon hearing the report: "We don't have time to be angry. Fix the line." At 11 o'clock, the attack resumed. 7 Corps broke through the German 352nd Infantry Division's defences. By nightfall, U.S. armour had advanced 3.2 miles, the fastest progress since D-Day. Bradley's staff recorded the numbers precisely: 35,000 vehicles, 200,000 men, 3,500 tanks. Within 3 days, the breach widened to 25 miles. At Avranches, the corridor opened. Patton's newly activated Third Army surged through, racing across Brittany. In 6 days, the American front extended over 100 miles. German resistance collapsed. Bradley's decision to halt Patton briefly on August 3rd, controversial at the time, preserved fuel reserves and avoided logistical collapse. His calculation was cold but correct. When the encirclement at Falaise closed on August 21st, 50,000 German soldiers were trapped. The figures tell the story. Between June and August 1944, the US First Army under Bradley's command advanced 350 miles, liberated Paris, and inflicted 240,000 Axis casualties. Allied losses stood at 122,000, high, but within the forecast range of 9.2%. When Eisenhower congratulated him on the success of Cobra, Bradley's reply was measured. It wasn't luck, it was arithmetic, done right. That arithmetic cost lives, but saved more. His daily log for August the 10th reads like an engineer's manual. Fuel consumption, 3.8 gallons per mile. Ammunition expenditure, 4,200 tons. Casualty rate, 1.9%. Morale steady. He slept 3 hours that night. By September, Bradley commanded the 12th Army Group, the largest American field command in history. 1.3 million men, 90 divisions, 7 corps. A logistical organism consuming 20,000 tons of supplies per day. His daily briefing lasted exactly 20 minutes. Patton once joked, "Brad's army runs on coffee and graphs." It was true. Bradley's headquarters looked less like a war room and more like a data center. Maps, charts, telephones, casualty boards. On the eve of the advance into Germany, a young staff officer asked him how he managed such vast responsibility. Bradley's answer was typical. "I don't lead by inspiration. I lead by elimination. Remove confusion and courage finds its way." By the end of summer 1944, France was free, the Wehrmacht was retreating, and the world began to see the calm face behind the American advance. He had commanded 1 million men through the bloodiest months of the war, and not once raised his voice. December 16th, 1944. 5:30 hours, Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The German counter-offensive, later called the Battle of the Bulge, hit with 200,000 men, 1,000 tanks, and near-perfect surprise. Allied lines broke across an 80-mile front. Radio reports from the front were chaotic. Enemy armour in force, multiple penetrations. From his headquarters in Luxembourg, General Omar N. Bradley listened to overlapping messages. His 12th Army Group, 1.3 million strong, was stretched thin. Weather-grounded Allied aircraft, fog hid German movement. Within 24 hours, 600,000 American troops were engaged. Casualty estimates exceeded 80,000. Bradley's map showed a wedge of German armour driving west, toward the Meuse River. He studied it in silence, pencil in hand, and said, "The line bends, but it will not break." Then he ordered 3 corps to hold the shoulders, north near Elsenborn, south at Bastogne. At Bastogne, 101st Airborne Division was encircled. Supplies fell to 18 hours' worth of ammunition. On December 22nd, the Germans demanded surrender. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe sent a single-word reply: "Nuts." Bradley, reading the transmission, smiled faintly and said, "That's soldier talk for no." On December 23rd, the weather cleared. 3,000 Allied aircraft took off in one morning, the largest single-day air sortie of the European war. C-47s dropped food and ammunition to Bastogne. Thunderbolts strafed German columns along the Houffalize Road. Patton's Third Army, moving north under Bradley's direction, advanced 100 miles in 4 days through ice and snow. It was the fastest winter maneuver in US military history. By January 2nd, 1945, the German advance was halted. 47 divisions had been engaged, 19 were destroyed or rendered ineffective. Allied losses totaled 89,500. German losses exceeded 100,000. Bradley's after-action report, 18 pages long, opened with a single line. "The enemy attacked where we were weakest. We held because men refused to yield." His command system worked under impossible strain. Despite snow, fuel shortages, and broken bridges, communications between corps remained above 80% reliability. That statistic, the invisible victory, was Bradley's pride. By March 1945, his armies had crossed the Rhine. At Remagen, engineers seized the Ludendorff Bridge before the Germans could destroy it. Bradley arrived at the site 2 days later. The bridge was cracked, twisted, and still carrying traffic. He inspected it quietly, nodded once and said, "Keep it open until it falls." It collapsed a week later, after 25,000 men and 400 vehicles had crossed. In those months, Bradley commanded more Americans than any general before or since. His daily responsibility equaled the population of Philadelphia. 1.3 million men, 50,000 vehicles, 6,000 tanks, 40,000 tons of supplies per day. Patton called him the world's biggest clerk. Eisenhower called him the Army's conscience. Bradley didn't correct either. He wasn't there to inspire or moralize. He was there to keep the machine of war from breaking apart. And he did, without losing his voice, his temper, or his humanity. May 8, 1945, Reims, France. The guns fell silent at 23:01 hours. In a small operations room, Omar N. Bradley signed the final combat dispatch for the 12th Army Group. Hostilities in Europe terminated. Outside, soldiers celebrated in the streets. Inside, Bradley folded his glasses, set them on the table and said to his aide, "We're done here. Let's get them home." By war's end, he had commanded over 1.3 million troops, the largest field army ever placed under an American general. His units had liberated more than 80,000 square miles of occupied Europe, captured 1.5 million prisoners, and advanced farther in less time than any force in US history. But he took no personal credit. In his own report, the first line read, "The men did it." When he returned to Washington in 1945, the crowds cheered louder for Patton and MacArthur. Bradley didn't mind. He was already working at a desk in the Veterans Administration, overseeing the reintegration of 8 million returning soldiers. Under his supervision, the agency processed 43,000 claims a week and built 52 hospitals in 3 years. To reporters, he simply said, "The war isn't over until they're cared for." In 1948, President Truman appointed him the first chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His task? To unify the Army, Navy, and the new Air Force. It was administrative, thankless, and deeply technical. Exactly his kind of war. He reorganized command hierarchies, standardized weapons procurement, and established the strategic framework that would shape the early Cold War. He served quietly, while MacArthur argued publicly, and Patton's legend grew in theaters. Bradley called himself a soldier in peacetime, still fighting for order. He testified at the Nuremberg trials, describing the Allied command's procedures for lawful warfare. His testimony was concise, unemotional, and precise. 1,267 words in total. His final sentence, "The Army does not improvise morality." By the 1950s, he was the last of the great wartime generals still in uniform. In 1950, Truman promoted him to 5-star rank, General of the Army, the 5th and final man to hold the title. When reporters asked him how it felt, he replied, "Heavy." He retired in 1953, aged 60. His post-war life was quiet, lecturing, writing, serving on defense boards. His memoir, A Soldier's Story, 1951, became a standard military text, not for its heroism, but for its discipline. His prose was clean, statistical, restrained. He wrote of leadership as patience under chaos. In April 1981, Omar Bradley died in New York at the age of 88. At his funeral in Arlington, there were no dramatic speeches. A single wreath bore the inscription, "The Soldier's General." Eisenhower had once said that Bradley brought order where there was confusion, reason where there was rage. His leadership wasn't mythic, it was methodical. He didn't storm beaches or make headlines, calculated them. He believed in the slow victory of organization, in the quiet heroism of competence. In the long record of modern war, he remains proof of a simple truth. You can win battles with brilliance, but you win wars with balance.